It takes a lot of time to prepare, but I'm happy to do it because I'm so grateful that so many of you ended up pre-ordering the new book, To Sell as Human. So we're off to a really great start, thanks to so many of you. Follow the instructions there. You should be able to listen in very easily. So if you have a problem doing that, let us know in the question box, which is going to be on the left-hand side of your screen. That question box you can also use, yes, you can, to ask a question. So we've already gotten a lot of questions in already, and I'll be looking at them. We're going to be here for about an hour. I'm going to probably spend half the time talking about what I'm going to talk about, and half the time taking your perceptive and insightful questions. So I hope that everybody is on board for this. Here's what I want to do here. I've got a variety of categories. I just want to tell you some things that are on my mind, some things that I'm looking for in 2013, some important sources of information for me that I think might be useful to you, along with some tools that I use that are very useful to me that might be useful to you. So we're going to cover the waterfront on a variety of things, and I'm hoping that various tidbits of it will be very useful to you in the coming year, both in terms of getting your own work done, that's where the tools come in, but also in terms of sort of sharpening your eyes and giving you a sense of what I think is going to be possibly a big deal, and that you might benefit from as well. So let's get started here. I want to start out by talking about books, okay? Because after all, we're all here because all of you were so fantastic in picking up an early copy of To Sell as Human. What I want to do at the outset here is tell you my three favorite books of the year, 2012, and then three books that I'm really looking forward to in 2013. Okay, so I often will do these kinds of things on the blog, but I wanted to just tell you guys this. I'm not going to be talking about it anywhere else, although some of these things I've kind of sort of mentioned elsewhere. So let me tell you my three favorite books of 2012. My three favorite books of 2012. One fiction and two nonfiction. The fiction is this book right here. Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk by Ben Fountain. It's actually Ben Fountain's first novel. I think this is just an extraordinary American novel. It's done reasonably well commercially, but it's done really well among the critics, which is often, for me, a warning sign. But in this case, the critics are actually right. It was a National Book Award finalist, got fairly rapturous reviews. And it's a really kind of a remarkable book in a number of different ways. It tells a story, a simple story, yet a very deep story. And the story takes place on Thanksgiving Day over a Dallas Cowboys football game. That's the entire narrative. It begins and ends with a Dallas Cowboy football game. It goes to a lot of what I think is right about America, some of the things that I think is wrong about America, and it tells the story of this guy named Billy Lynn, who is back from a firefight in Afghanistan and is now being celebrated as a war hero, and he and his soldier colleagues end up being part of a halftime show featuring Beyonce, Destiny's Child, and complications ensue. So I really heartily recommend this book. I've given it out. I've recommended it to many people. It's one of the best American novels that I've read in a very long time. So not everybody's going to like this book, but certainly depending on your politics, but I think it's a remarkable piece of work. Let me tell you about nonfiction here, which of course I read more nonfiction than fiction. Here is, hands down, a book that you got to get. The Little Book of Talent by Daniel Coyle. Daniel Coyle wrote the Talent Code. He's written a lot of other books. He wrote about Lance Armstrong as well. This is just, if you like Carol Dweck, if you like some of the stuff that I wrote about in Drive, if you like, say, Gladwell's Outliers or Jeff Colvin's Talent is Overrated, this book goes into the social science of performance, how to get better at stuff, all right? How to practice, how to do better at work, how to improve your skills, how to really learn just about anything that you want to master, whether it's playing the drums or speaking a language or hitting a curveball or learning how to write better. And what he's done is he's taken the social science and distilled it into 52 tips. Really, really hands-on, really practical, really simple. I mean, the book is, I have a copy of it right here. The book is only 122 pages long. 122 pages long. And each tip is maybe 2 or 3 pages. But it's really itty-bitty little books are kind of light. They're not very substantive. This book is substantive and digestible. It's a remarkable piece of work. For me, the highest compliment I can give a book is to say that I wish I'd written it. So get this book, guys. Another of my favorite books of the year. Finally, number 3, another nonfiction book, Lane Hardin's Escape from Camp 14. This is just an incredibly gripping read about a guy who grows up in a political prisoner camp in North Korea and eventually escapes. I have a peculiar fascination with North Korea. I've read a number of books about that place because I found it so unbelievably bizarre and interesting and horrifying in a way. At some level, it's remarkable that we even allow what goes on there to go on without doing something about it. But this is just a really great, gripping read about one guy. You're not going to, especially, I mean, all of us on this call, if you have access to a webinar, you have no understanding of what it's like in certain parts of North Korea, particularly the very harsh camp for political prisoners. And these political prisoners, many of them are political prisoners only because some relative in the past said something bad about the regime. So in this case, the guy who escaped, his father's brother said something about the regime, and that's why the entire family is in a horrific North Korean prison camp. A really, really, really gripping read. So those are my 3 books for 2012. Let's talk about 2013. The 3 books that I've read the early versions of, I think are going to be really interesting. I think that you're really going to enjoy. Well, one of them is Give and Take by Adam Grant. Adam Grant, for those of you who cracked open To Sell Is Human, might remember that I've written a little bit about his research in the past. I wrote a little bit about it in this new book, To Sell Is Human. And he harvests the social science to take a really cool and interesting look at how people behave and basically showing that success is determined not only by talent to some extent, by hard work to a large extent, how you practice to a large extent, but also by what he calls people's reciprocity style, how they reciprocate. And he divides the world into 3 categories: givers, takers, and matchers. Now, givers are people who give more than they get. Matchers are people who think of everything in that kind of transactional way. I'm going to give you X and you're going to return X and we're going to have an even exchange. And then takers. Takers are the people we despise, who take more than they get. And what Adam has found out, which is quite remarkable, is that the most unsuccessful people are givers. Sort of disappointing, right? But he's also found that the most successful people are givers. That givers, people who give more than they get, end up at both sides of the success spectrum, both in terms of satisfaction, happiness, and performance. And he goes through some of the science telling us why becoming kind of an effective giver is even better than being a matcher. Most of us are matchers, he says. Some of us are givers, some of us are takers. But the givers do the best. They also do the worst. And he has some tips on how you can be a giver without being a doormat. Really interesting, very substantive, fascinating book. There's another book, also by Adam is a professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. There's another professor there named Jonah Berger who has a book coming out called Contagious, about why things catch on. And what he does is he goes through, it's sort of like son of Tipping Point to some extent, daughter of Tipping Point. He goes in and talks about why do some videos go viral, why do some restaurants become hot, and really unpacks some of the social science behind it and offers a lot of really useful tips on how to make things a little bit more contagious. And actually, he focuses a lot on inherent remarkability, which gives a little bit of kind of social science credence to what Seth Godin has been talking about for years and years and years. It ends up being, we all knew he was right. Now we have extra confirmation of that. So that is Contagious. Finally, the 3rd book is this book right here, Happy Money, Science of Smarter Spending. This is, as someone who's spent a lot of time researching selling, I've become extremely interested in buying as well. And Elizabeth Dunn, whose research I've written about once before, really interesting young social psychologist. She and her colleague Michael Norton have written a book about basically saying that the way we spend money affects our happiness. We tend to think that a conventional economic view is that simply spending money, getting stuff, makes us happy. What she has found out in her remarkable research is that what we spend money on is actually more important. Spending money on experiences, for instance, is more satisfying than spending money on things. Spending money on other people turns out to make us far happier than spending money on ourselves. So those are three really cool books that I think you're going to really dig in the coming new year. And I hope you'll check them out. Maybe we'll be able to do something about them on the Pink blog. Maybe we'll even get a couple of these folks on office hours. So that is the books. Let's go to ideas and trends. All right, I got a bunch of stuff for you here, but I want to start off by talking about one of the things that's most exciting to me in my life, which is charts. I want to tell you about the two charts that really, really blew me away this year, and that I continue to think about. I don't know exactly what to make of them. It's not as if I've distilled some kind of wisdom and saying I or you or any of us should do X, Y, or Z because of these, but they're really astonishing charts. One is from McKinsey Global Institute. The other is from, I think I got it from Ezra Klein at the Washington Post. So here's the first one. I hope that you can see this well. Here we go. This is, I hope you can see it. This is, I don't have a cool little pointer thing, unfortunately. So you'll have to imagine me pointing here. So, okay, here's what this is. This looks at the World Economic Center of Gravity. That is, if you take the world and say, you know, where is the center of gravity economically? That is, where is the middle point? You know, half of economic activity is to the west, half of economic activity is to the east. Basically, where is the most economic activity going on? If you look down at the bottom right-hand corner of that screen, where it says, it looks like ice, but it's 1 CE, year 1 Christian era, what it shows is that the economic center of gravity of the world was down there in South Asia. In 1500, it moved a little north and west. By 1820, it moved a little bit more north and west. Take a look at what happens between 1820 and 1913. It moves, bingo, the economic center of gravity in the world is in Europe. 1940, it continues, or Northern Europe, continues to be the same thing. Now, look what happens. Look what happens from 1940 to 1950. Boom, this is the rise of the United States. All right, so the United States becomes the preeminent economic power. That shifts the center of gravity toward the United States, toward the West. If you look at the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even to 2000, it's still very much tilted toward North America and the West. It's also very far north, largely because of not much economic activity, say, in Africa, below the equator. But take a look at what happens between 2000 and 2010. A remarkable move back east. The economic center of gravity in the last 10 years has moved as far as it did after World War II. Indeed, as far as it moved from after World War I and World War II. And it's going to continue to move further south and further east as time goes on. So this is, just think of just a remarkable finding showing how our world has changed over the last 10 or 12 years. Let's go to the next one. Even though it's New Year's and it refers to time, I do want to talk about death. So let's talk about U.S. causes of death. This is another very remarkable chart. In 1900, look at the main causes of death in the United States. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, gastrointestinal infection. Essentially, a century later, those causes of death have disappeared. People aren't, in the United States, people are not dying. Some people are dying of those things, unfortunately, but not anywhere close to the numbers. So there are two interesting things here. Well, there are a number of interesting things. One interesting thing about this chart is that the number of deaths per 100,000 people has declined pretty much by half.